Okay, so if you can hear me, I think we can just get started. Okay, thank you to all of you for being here today. Thank you to our speakers, and welcome to this event as we're going to be exploring how to get to a low carbon and resilient humanitarian sector. I would like to start just by saying we're very happy to have this conversation at ECOSOC. We feel it's a very strategic conversation to have for the humanitarian sector and for the question of climate change. And we're very thankful to the ECOSOC organizers, as well as to the Environment and Humanitarian Action Network and the JAU Secretariat, Charlotta Benedek, for organizing this event today under the auspices of the EHAN. I would like to thank as well our wonderful co-sponsors who are really sort of showing how important and strategic this conversation is. We have ECHO, the Netherlands, Norway, Switzerland, and the UAE co-sponsoring this event. So thank you very much for doing so, for your support. As the window for containing global warming is closing, we know that solution exists. I think the IPCC 2023 report was very clear about that, but these solutions are not yet implemented as they should be, and they need to be scaled up. So against this backdrop, what we will explore today is what's the role of humanitarian actors and of the humanitarian sector, how they need to take action in terms of climate transformation, but what it means concretely in terms of their own decarbonization and reduction of carbon and environmental footprint. Many initiatives have been taken already in the sector. What we will question today is what do we need to actually deploy these initiatives and these solutions at scale so that we can have a humanitarian sector reaching a tipping point towards getting low carbon and resilient. So to explore this important and strategic question, we are very lucky to have a set of keynote speakers and panelists in person here today and online. I'm just going to walk you through the program and then hand over to our keynote speakers. So for the keynote addresses, we'll have Bruno Yokum, Executive Director of Climate Action Accelerator, as well as Ms. Shaheen Ashraf, Chairwoman of the Board of Trustees of ICVA, and Head of Global Advocacy at Islamic Relief. She's going to be joining online. And Her Excellency Lubna Kassim is excused. She unfortunately had to be called to another important meeting. So after those keynote addresses, we'll walk us through strategic help us provide a strategic perspective. We'll delve into what this all means for field actors, local NGOs, international NGOs, and we're very lucky to have a variety of them present today. Ms. Lai Lingli, Deputy General Director at MSF Operational Center Geneva, Dr. Ousmane Sawad Godo, who is going to be joining us from Burkina Faso online. We are very lucky to have as well Ms. Runa Khan, who happens to be traveling in Europe and is joining us for this conversation, Executive Director and Founder of Friendship. Thank you, Runa, for being here. And Mr. Aurélien Donnet, who is on his way from the gate. I think we all know how complex it can be to enter the Palais, so he will be joining us very soon. The Vice CEO, Finance, Innovation and Investment at Acted. We'll have time for questions and answers. A few people have already let me know that they would like to speak from the floor, so I've written down your names and we'll make sure to get back to you as we get to the Q&A sessions. So with this, just a few housekeeping rules. This is an English-speaking event, so we are not offering translation to the room, but we do have a French-speaking speaker who is Mr. Sawadogo, and so we are offering translation only for his intervention. So his intervention is going to be in French, and one of my colleagues is going to translate into English. So we try to arrange this, and then. Maybe just, of course, for those who are joining us online, we had over 100 registration online for the event. Please mute your mic if you're not speaking. and write also your questions in the Q&A. My colleague will moderate the chat and let me know if we have any question there. I've been told actually by some of you that the WebEx links might not be working for everyone. So my colleague Zani is right here in the room and can help work out some technical issues you may have. All right. So without further ado, I'm turning first to Bruno for introducing the event.
Yes. So thank you very much. Before I talk about how important this subject is, I'd just like to give a few words of introduction on the Climate Action Accelerator, which is it's a recent initiative. It's a bit more than 2 years old. It's a non-for-profit initiative based in Geneva, and what we aim at is mobilizing organizations from the international aid sector, health sector, and maybe in a second stage, higher education and research, to really accelerate the deployment of climate solutions at their level and in their ecosystem. We help organizations. Our first pillar of action is to help organizations work on their practices to align with the Paris Agreement, and notably a trajectory of absolute reduction of their emissions, and looking at both the strategic and technical steps to reach this, but also with national actors to see how to integrate adaptation, resilience, and low-carbon development, notably in countries which are more vulnerable and directly affected. Second pillar is an open source community of practice and action, so really disseminating lessons learned and knowledge to actually help this acceleration so that everybody can benefit from it. And the third pillar is how to initiate a domino effect, working with champions to really bring along peers and especially amplify at a sector level. And I'll say a few words about this at the end. Now, why is this subject important and strategic? It's sometimes the question of footprint in organizations is sometimes seen as a technical dossier and not necessarily mainstreamed as a strategic one. Not only is it important because of what we know of the climate crisis and planetary limits, which basically means that every actor in society, must find ways of reducing radically their emissions in the 2 decades to come. But it's also about learning how to operate in a world where needs are going to grow probably several-fold in the years to come, while obviously the climate crisis is going to be much more impactful, but also energy prices are going to go higher and higher structurally, eating up margins of maneuvers for organization. It's already happening. It's already happening that inflation and energy costs are actually eating away margins of maneuver from many organizations. So it's also about resilience. So it's it's often opposed, adaptation, resilience, mitigation. When you look at practical solutions for organizations at every level, what you see is solutions have impacts on all these levels together, and there are obviously many co-benefits. So it's about learning how to operate in the future under high constraints. Second, another point is about the momentum today. It is the right moment to try, with the different experiences of notably organizations that are advanced on this subject, to capitalize and to try to influence the sector. There's a difference between having a few front guard organizations trying to align themselves and having the critical mass at sector level trying to basically get fit for purpose, as the title suggests. And we know there are more than 350 signatories of the Climate and Environment Charter. A lot of them are looking at how to deal with this, how to turn broad intentions into practice. So there's a real need to actually bring this support. Not only support, but also principles. There are in the field of climate action still very strong differences in the way to approach this. So what do you count in your emissions? Do you claim climate neutrality because you've bought some offsets, for example? Or there are many other questions. And I think it's really time to come to a more principled approach and harmonize the way organizations of the sector are addressing this. It's also a very strong focus on operationalizing, setting hard targets for organization and being accountable and monitoring them, so having an evaluation framework. And all these different, I would say, elements are going to be at the core of a work that we're currently doing this year, which is a sectoral roadmap for the humanitarian sector and aid organizations, which should be capitalizing on the first 15 or 20 experiences we have with NGOs and trying to make it available for the rest of the sector. And looking also, when you look at the big picture, the whole humanitarian international assistance, where are the big levers and how should this be approached to be, for the transformation to be effective. So this roadmap, which is led in consultation with many of you, should be delivered by probably the end of this year or beginning of next year. And it will be also an opportunity to then present the findings to a wider audience. And I'll maybe leave the floor to our next speaker. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Bruno, for these initial introductory remarks. I'm turning to you, Zani, if Shane is online and ready to speak. Yeah, thank you. It's the beauty of the hybrid event, switching from online to in person. Okay. Okay. So if Shane is not with us right now, we may just simply start with the panel and reach out to her a little bit later. Come back to her later. Okay, very well. Without further ado, we're going to start the conversation. And as I was mentioning, the main question we will explore in this panel discussion will be really looking at what we need to accelerate the climate transformation in the humanitarian sector towards becoming a low-carbon industry. And what we will hear from our panelists today is what they have actually initiated at the level of their organizations, why this... did you have a sound issue? I'm sorry. It's good? Okay. Okay. So we'll explore, sorry, I'm going again. We'll explore what it means some of these organizations are actually initiated really impressive experiences in terms of decarbonization and reduction of carbon and environment footprint. So we'll hear from their experience, as well as have their own perspective of what is needed for the sector to actually reach this tipping point and have the level of transformation that we need. To see. We're going to be also very interested looking at how this greening of your activities relates also to maintaining or developing further your capacity to deliver the programming. So all these themes are very much interlinked. And so to start, delve into this conversation, I'm very happy to introduce Laïline. So Laïline is currently, as I was mentioning, Deputy General Director, External Affairs and Field Operations at MSF Switzerland, Operational Center Geneva. And she supports the MSF team engaged in themes such as planetary health, diversity and inclusion, duty of care and organizational networks. And as a sponsor of the planetary health project or thematic at MSF, she accompanies the creation and implementation of the Climate and Environment Roadmap 2030 that MSF has released April last year, if I'm not mistaken. And she's a humanitarian professional with over 20 years experience in a variety of contexts and situations, including with MSF Canada in the past, as well as with the Canadian Red Cross and the Red Cross movement. So, Nailing, the floor is yours. Thank you.
There. Good afternoon. I will start again and offer to answer any questions in French at the end, if necessary. So my question, the question I was asked to launch into this panel is, why did we engage with Climate Action Accelerator in the production of our climate and environmental roadmap? And first I have to go back a little bit and explain a little bit that what we see in the field. So for example, in the last 4 years in South Sudan, we've seen that there are historic floods that have affected 1 million people. We have seen that millions of livestock have perished, and we see that 10% of arable land has become basically a swamp. And that in this large areas of stagnant floodwater, they have become basically the perfect breeding ground for mosquitoes, and therefore has led to an explosion of malaria. So in 2023 alone, MSF, Médecins Sans Frontières, has treated over 80,000 people with malaria in South Sudan, and as well, along with that, we have treated 1,434 children with malnutrition. So clearly, the planet's changing ecosystem will continue to challenge our operational responses. And we see that with the global ecological changes that are leading to significant health and humanitarian impacts. For example, we have emerging diseases, we have malnutrition, we have mental health issues, displacement, and conflict. We also see that and increasingly that our medical and operational relevance today and tomorrow will depend on how we define health. And in fact, not only that the health is not only defined by the absence of disease, but also as determinants of social, economic, political issues, but increasingly health is going to be defined by ecological determinants as well. So we can no longer ignore that the climate emergency is in fact a health and humanitarian crisis. It sounds dramatic, but really at MSF, our ambition is to respond to the health impacts of the climate emergency on the people we assist. And therefore, at the same time that we have this ambition, we need to also ourselves reduce our own carbon footprint and environmental footprint. And this is basically a key and a cornerstone of our multi-year strategic planning. So as Bruno, you were mentioning, this is not just an operational issue. It's really, goes much beyond that. It's about our relevance today and in the future. So what were the outcomes of this engagement that we had with the Climate Action Accelerator? First, there were 3 main outcomes that I will share with you today, but of course, it's a synthesis. The first one is that in 2022, as mentioned, MSF, the movement, signed the Climate and Environment Charter for Humanitarian Organizations to reduce our carbon emissions by 50% in 2030. And an example of some of the commitments we made here at Operations Center Geneva, there were 6, we covered programs. So we committed to making sure that we factor in climate and environmental risks in the analysis of our medical humanitarian programs. In terms of emissions, we will reduce our consumption, and we will our emissions by 50% to 2030. That's part of the charter. In terms of energy, we will limit our consumption by increasing the share of renewable energy sources. In terms of supply, to ensure that sustainability is embedded throughout our supply chain. That's actually the biggest challenge for us. And waste, in terms of our waste management in our projects, we would like that all of our projects have a waste management plan in place. And in terms of people, that we ensure that our staff understand the environmental impact of our own actions, and that there are the resources and training provided for them to act. So that's the first outcome. The second outcome is that the MSF movement has been mobilized to estimate its own carbon footprint. And so just fresh off the presses, we know that in 2019, the MSF movement had a carbon emission totaling 500 tons of carbon, of CO2. 500,000 tons of CO2. Yeah, that would be actually excellent. We're finished. Sorry, that's right. Then finally, the third outcome is that this process has stimulated our teams to pilot and to monitor some of the solutions that have been created as part of this roadmap. So this roadmap has 32 solutions. It's a short document, but and in it, for example, we know that so far we have solarized about 30% of our projects, which is not bad, but there's a lot of work still to be done. And we're now also about to launch a campaign to reduce the single use of medical items. For example, gloves. And this is most of all a behavior change campaign. And the idea is to really reduce not only the medical waste that's produced, but to allow people to recognize that, okay, even though we must be careful about ensuring patient safety and quality of care, that we also have to be cognizant of a responsible use of the items in our medical programs. So why again did we partner with CIA? We needed dedicated expertise in the house that we didn't have, and we needed a partner to accompany us through the creation and construction of this roadmap. So I'll leave you with a little analogy, and the process, you know, and I think it's shorter, so if any of you that are interested, it probably is not going to take as long, but basically we went through a 9-month process of creating a roadmap that was not unlike that of preparing to give birth to a child. So for the first 3 months, we went through that difficult, nauseating phase. You know, there was queasiness. People didn't really want to talk about this topic. There was a lot of resistance, you know, and then finally, slowly, there were lots of ideas that came forth from engaging people. Well, what do you think we should do? And so ideas spewed forth, and then we went on to the next phase. So the next 3 months were like the phase where you have to go in and do your medical checkups, you know, and you have to consult with people. And so CAA, you know, every week was consulting with a different team. We had our operations team, we had a logistics team, the medical team, finance. Anybody who would listen was consulted. And then the last 3 months was not unlike the typical, well, what should we name this baby? And everybody had an opinion. People thought, oh, is that an appropriate solution? And that's really not going to be feasible. And so there was a lot of discussion. And in the end, you know, we're thinking, well, is it just, you know, the parents' ambitions alone that are going to make this baby succeed? And so that was the creation of the roadmap. And now we have to go on to the next phase, which is to implement all the wonderful ideas that we gathered from all of our teams all over the globe. And we have to keep sustaining and making sure that, you know, this child grows and is, you know, and that takes resources, that takes community. And if anything, it's always easier to, you know, bring up a child with a partner in a supportive community than to do it alone. So I leave you with that thought.
Thank you so much. And that's a really interesting analogy about the preservation of life, actually, indirectly. So thank you for sharing this really interesting and organizational process that led to the creation of the roadmap. I would be interested if you could share with us what are the lessons that you've learned that you think could be helpful to other organizations and to the rest of the sector, including UN, donors, etc., when it comes to, again, accelerating this transformation. You've learned elements through your own work and your own experience that can potentially help others to gain time.
Yeah. I would say the first thing is to give meaning to this work. Colleagues really need to understand why it's important to even go down this path. And it's important that colleagues also not only understand why, but how they can make a difference. How can they contribute? I think that's number one. Lesson number two is that it's really essential to engage colleagues in finding solutions right from the start. You know, you can't come up with that even a pre-baked plan. It's really right from ground zero. That's important, and that really helped us, I think, to engage all of our teams. And then finally, it's to make provisions, both staff, financial resources, to make the solutions really become a reality. And that's kind of where we're at now. You know, we've done some implementation, but we're seeing that to sustain this work is going to require a lot more effort. But I'm not going to lie to you and say that it's been easy. You know, I don't want to paint a rosy picture because, as Bruno mentioned, I think the topic of measuring, you know, the carbon emissions has caused a lot of debate. You know, what should we really be measuring? Even within MSF, you know, we're a large global organization, and people have different opinions about how far to measure. Do we really need to, you know, how many resources should we really devote to measuring? And yet, you know, you have to know from where you start. You know, what's the baseline? And at least for me, I think it's important to show progress towards. You know, it's not a precise science, but you have to feel like you're really at least making a dent. And then in terms of engaging with the humanitarian sector, I think that already our experience last year in releasing a joint statement with ICRC at the COP27 climate conference, it was a first, I think, for us as organizations to make such a statement on climate. And it became pretty clear to us, I think, that health was not actually on the agenda at previous COP negotiations. And I'm happy to learn that, in fact, this year there will be a whole day devoted to health and relief at COP28. So as a sector, I think we've made some progress in terms of advancing this discussion.
Thank you so much, Lining. There was a lot in what you said, so I'm sure we'll come back to you later in the conversation. If technique allows, I'm going to give the floor to Dr. Ousmane. Is he online? Yes? Okay. So Dr. Ousmane Sawadogo is the general coordinator of Keogo in Burkina Faso. So he's joining us all the way from there. He is a specialist on radicalization and violent extremism in West Africa and has a PhD in education science. He has also a wealth of experience in different sectors and especially 25 years experience in the humanitarian sector in the Sahel and beyond. So for this part of the conversation, as I was mentioning earlier, for those in the room and online who don't speak, who cannot understand French, you would need to, so for those in the room, you need to use this to listen to translation. And for people online, you will hear my colleague speak in the mic. Yeah? OK. Bonjour, Dr. Ousmane, vous nous entendez?
Oui, je vous entends très bien.
Alors, je vous donne la parole pour nous présenter votre organisation et la raison pour laquelle vous avez souhaité vous engager dans une démarche de réduction des émissions et de votre profil environnemental et carbone.
OK, merci beaucoup.
Okay, thank you very much.
Alors, oui, Mon organisation s'appelle Kyogo.
My organization
C'est
name is
une
Kyogo.
organisation de protection de l'enfance.
It's an organization of child protection.
Voilà, nous sommes au Burkina Faso, dans le Sahel, un pays très chaud, confronté à la chaleur et aujourd'hui au terrorisme et bien sûr à beaucoup d'autres effets dus à la sécheresse qui est en train de nous envahir depuis un certain temps.
We live in Burkina Faso in Sahel, so in a very hot country that's faced drought and climate change for a long time, as well as now terrorism.
Alors, comment Kyogo est arrivé à là? Il faut dire que en 2019, il y a eu une grande quantité d'eau qui est tombée à Ouagadougou, équivalent en une matinée, donc équivalent à la pluie de toute la saison, c'est-à-dire 3 mois de pluie. Et là, c'était une grosse catastrophe.
Kyogo happened because after very big rain, the whole season of rain fell down in a day, which was a massive catastrophe in Ouagadougou.
Alors, à partir de ce moment, nous qui sommes dans des projets médico-psychosociaux, on a réfléchi et nous avons dit il faut agir.
We are in medical social project, so we thought about it and decided to act.
Et comme nous travaillons avec les enfants et jeunes, nous avons dit nous sommes en première ligne et l'avenir appartient à la jeunesse.
As we work with young children, we thought a future belongs to the youth, so we need to act.
Alors, soit en passant, il faut dire que notre organisation a des valeurs bien précises. Il y en a 4 fondamentalement qui sont la participation de l'enfant et du jeune, ce qui veut dire que c'est lui qui est au centre et tout se fait avec lui.
So we have, as an organization, 4 core values. The first one is child participation, meaning that everything is done around the child and with the child.
Alors, nous concentrons également en deuxième position sur l'intérêt supérieur de l'enfant et du jeune que nous accompagnons. Et dans ce sens, l'écoute active et le respect restent vraiment des valeurs importantes pour nous.
So the second one is the best interest of the child, and in that sense, the most important values are the respect and listening of children.
Et le troisième, c'est la non-discrimination. Et enfin, la quatrième valeur, c'est le partenariat où nous mettons beaucoup d'accent sur les partenaires, notamment ONG et respectueuses des droits de l'homme en façon générale et qui s'intéressent donc à la protection et à la santé ou qui sont notre ancrage en termes de valeurs.
The last 2 ones are non-discrimination and partnership. In the partnership, we concentrate on other NGOs with mutual respect and same player partners in the field who work in children protection, and they have our same values in the respect of human rights.
Nous nous sommes dit, nous pourrons être un bel exemple aux yeux des Burkinabés en ce qui concerne la protection de l'environnement, vu que nous travaillons en milieu ouvert, donc en rue, dans les quartiers, etc. Donc, en contact avec la communauté à qui nous pouvons parler. Et nous travaillons également en milieu fermé, dans des centres d'hébergement où certains types de populations sont internés pendant un moment donné pour un accompagnement médico-psychosocial.
So we thought that we could be a good example for the Burkinabe population because we work in both open and closed environment. The open environment in the street, in direct contact with the people, we can talk to them, raise awareness, and we also work into closed environment, which is sometimes when people need to be and facilities for medical aid, psychosocial aid.
Nous travaillons principalement avec les enfants et les familles vulnérables, les enfants et jeunes victimes de violences sexuelles, les jeunes mères abandonnées tout simplement parce qu'elles ont piqué la grossesse avant le mariage et les enfants en conflit avec la loi.
We work generally with children, minors and young people, partially estranged from their family, victim of gender-based violence and sexual aggressions, young abandoned women, because mothers, because they had a child before marriage, and also children in conflict with the law or at risk.
Dr. Ousmane, are you still with us?
Docteur Ousmane, vous êtes toujours avec nous?
So I think Dr. Ousmane was right about to tell us more about the climate programming. So we're just so much looking forward to hearing about this experience. Okay, let's try and give it 1 minute, and if not, we will go to the next speaker and get back to Dr. Ousmane if we've lost him. Dr. Ousmane, vous nous entendez? Okay. Okay, alors, so we will maybe pause on Dr. Ousmane for now.
Désolé, je suis là. Vous m'entendez?
Ah, voilà.
Désolé, je suis là. C'est la problématique du Sahel. C'est la problématique du Sahel. Désolé.
Mais merci à vous de vous connecter depuis le Sahel.
Oui, je suis à Ouagadougou, oui.
Est-ce que vous pouvez prendre maintenant comme 3 minutes pour nous expliquer le projet de Village One Health?
Can you take 3 minutes to explain to us the One Health project?
Merci beaucoup.
Merci. Alors, le village One Health, c'est un village que nous avons créé sur 4 hectares. Et dans ce village, vous avez un centre médical, un centre d'hébergement.
The One Health Village is a village that we created on 4,000 square meter, and you have medical center and dispensary maternity unit.
Il y a également une école et tout ça, ça fonctionne sur l'énergie solaire et même l'eau que nous utilisons fonctionne sur l'énergie solaire.
And all the village function on solar energy, even the water that we use.
Alors, nous l'avons appelé One Health. Pourquoi? Parce que nous nous sommes dit, nous allons vivre dans un environnement où il y a l'homme, la nature et les animaux sans agressivité et vivre heureux.
So we called it One Health because we wanted to live in a place where there's going to be man, animals and nature all living together without violence and living well and happily together.
Alors, cela nous permettrait de faire un transfert et de dire à la jeunesse, c'est vous qui avez l'avenir, il faut imiter. Et dans ce village, donc, vous avez un jardin, vous avez de l'élevage et vous avez l'eau qui fonctionne à partir de l'énergie solaire.
So it was a way for us to tell youth that they're the future and they have to replicate. There's a garden, there's animals, and everything functions with solar electricity.
Alors, les déchets animaux serviront à faire du fumier naturel sans utiliser des pesticides. Et ce que nous allons cultiver, ça sera vraiment écologique à consommer.
So waste is going to be used for natural compost, and what we consume are going to be what we produced.
Et donc, et les habitants qui sont les filles-mères pourront en profiter pour elles et leurs bébés et leurs enfants que nous avons inscrits justement dans l'école maternelle de ce village.
And the young woman mother and their children are going to be able to benefit for this matching unit in the school, the nursery school that we've installed in the village.
Donc, tout fonctionne 24 heures sur 24 dans ce village, aussi bien au niveau santé et qu'au niveau de tous les autres aspects, eau, hygiène,
Everything
assainissement.
works 24 hours and 24 hours
Vous m'entendez?
in this village from the health aspect. Pardon, Dr. Ousmane, il y a eu un problème, je n'ai pas eu la suite.
OK. Donc, je disais, oui, c'est un village où tout fonctionne à H24 et il doit être un village modèle pour montrer à l'ensemble qu'il soit soins physiques ou mentaux et la population générale que nous devons changer.
I think we have technical issues again with Dr. Ousmane, so we might need to...
Tu m'entends?
Oui, Dr. Ousmane, on a des petits problèmes de connexion, mais on a bien entendu la description du village One Health. On va devoir passer aux autres panélistes, mais il y a beaucoup de choses dans ce que vous avez dit et nous allons revenir avec des questions tout à l'heure vers vous. Merci beaucoup. So now that we have heard from, now that we have heard from Dr. Ousmane, what was the objective actually, and what was the intention of a local organization based in Sahel to develop somehow climate smart programming and integrate green energy and other solutions into their programming as a holistic approach. I would like to turn to Runa Khan. Runa is, as I was mentioning, the founder and executive director of an NGO called Friendship in Bangladesh. And this organization is in Bangladesh, of course, Bangladesh is, of course, a country facing humanity's very important pressing challenge, and Friendship helps to transform the lives of people by working together with vulnerable people and remote communities. And you have like main direction of action in terms of saving lives, poverty alleviation, climate adaptation, and empowerment. And since the very start, you developed a very strong climate-related approach. There is so much actually in your resume, Runa, that I won't have the time to say it all, but you are an advocate of climate change and human rights, women empowerment, leadership, and we're very delighted and honored to have you here today. So you just need to press strong the button actually on your mic. And okay, I think maybe. So I will close it just after the question. I would like first to ask you to tell us more about what are the impacts of climate change in daily lives for the population in Bangladesh, and why you sought to integrate climate action from the start into your programming.
Well, you see it works. So, voila. So thank you very much. And I'm so happy to be here with all of you today. Because, you know, so I was hearing Bruno speak, and of course, Lee, wonderful. And it's the thing is that, as you said, that you needed to get the organization rolling to understand their needs for taking actions which are climatically acceptable for the world. Now, we are in a way, we started from a complete different perspective. We land up in places, and I landed up 20 years ago on the river Brahmaputra, hundreds of islands, I mean, over 600 islands, you know, in our first survey, and nobody was working in these islands. All the large international organizations, local organizations, one or two were having ad hoc interventions, and there were more than 40,000 NGOs in Bangladesh. So then you start thinking what's happening, you know, and everywhere you go, there are millions of people. I mean, 3-4 million people if you take the islands and if you take the 5 kilometers of approximately on the side of the riverbanks. And then I realized that these were not being addressed by anyone simply because it was just too difficult to set up mechanism of ensuring dependable structures of services. So be it in health, be it in education, be it in income generation, or access to justice, or climate actions, even indigenous culture, you know, saving that. Somehow it was just not being done because it was so difficult. Here there were lands, when there were storms coming in, people were migrating continuously, you know, their homes were being swept away. So there were people I've met, one person only I have to say, 68 times in their lifetime, and over the last 15 years, it was accelerated, you see? And then there were 40 times in their lifetime, 12 times in their lifetime, and every time you're moving, you become poorer and poorer. So climate 20 years ago was a very big issue, of course, but then there were no pilot projects, mitigation projects as such in action. But I decided that this is where the real need was. And there were two themes which we could not ignore at all. One, there was no way to fight against the impact of the climate, geography and climate. So hurricanes were coming in, storms were coming in, land was breaking, and people were moving. Number two, how do you continue your services there in the heart and in the habits of people if you do not deal in trying to give them deep dignity, respect, and hope? And in doing this, you needed to address really the needs of the community so that whatever service you give them, that can be internalized, accepted, and used even when we are not there. So I started the first mobile ship hospitals in the country. So the ship hospitals, we are going to have our 7th hospitals. We have 2 going. 2 are getting launched this month, 3 more in November. And then we built a whole healthcare system which was built on mobility. So you have the hospital ships and land ships where it was land hospitals where it was needed, community clinics, mobile clinics, more than 800 of them. And everything was need-based. So once I go to an island and I see a child crying, and I ask the mother what's happened. So the child was burnt 3 days before, and no one could help the child because there was nothing on that island. So then you say, okay, you have the ships, secondary care, you know, we're having reconstructive surgeries. People are supposed to come there. And then there is this child burnt, and they don't even have money or the resources of a boat to bring the child to the hospital. So then you have to, you know, understand how to work with this and these systems. And so therefore, we started a 3-tier healthcare program. Even our schools are the same. We have schools where we take people from the community, train them as teachers. Schools are all mobile. They can be brought down within 2 hours, rebuilt within 3-4 hours, 5 hours. And, you know, everywhere we went, we tried to link the people with the government wherever they could, whenever we could, because it's a river which is, you know, Bangladesh is a country of rivers, 170 million people, 1/4 the size of France, and 52% always underwater. So you can understand the density of population. And all around the rivers and all along the coastal belt where we work, every area, 100% of our core work has to do with working with IDPs, you know, and we are directly impacting with services, not impacting, but directly giving services to 7.5 million people every year, and out of which 60% is like at least for 2 years or 3 years. So even for access to funding, follow-up of patients who've got cervical cancer, we needed to innovate system by which we could do the follow-ups. Children EPI, you know, we found less than 15% of the children even having access to EPI. I mean, less means really less. So let's not get into that. And then within a year and a half, actually say within 1 year, 8 months, it was 98.5%, just because we had to innovate and remodel. I don't like the term innovate. We had to respect the environment and make the projects work with the environments. In doing so, then you start realizing that, you know, when you talk about one sustainable, one health, when you start thinking about being climate friendly, environmental friendly, it is a question of deep respect of everything, every life, every environmental tree that you touch, basically. I mean, you deworm the children and you don't deworm the animals, it doesn't work. You cut down the trees, and when the floods come in, you have nothing to even make a raft if you cut off the banana plants. You know, so the ecosystem needed to be such that it was environmentally, climatically sound. Otherwise, it's only when thrusts of lot of money and interventions and innovation come in, you can afford things which are non-environmental to implement. Really, we really found that to happen. And let's take an example of our solar village. So the government has committed to making 100% of the areas of the country get energy. In a land, and where movement can happen for a kilometer within hours, it's hardly feasible. So we needed to bring in solar infrastructure, which made the whole ecosystem. So we have solar villages. We started the first solar villages simply because I didn't want to give solar home systems, because what do you do with the battery? You know, if a battery can't be addressed, you give 1 million solar home systems and you are landed in a square one problem in trying to solve another. So this kind of an action provoking wrong action is a continuous, thinking process which you have to bring into when you're working with climate, because so many actions look so beautiful, and then it provokes so many wrong actions which you don't calculate initially, provoking corruption, provoking, like batteries being thrown into the water. So we needed to manage everything. And in doing that, these solar villages have come up. Then we realized that funding has to come in to make these villages, but there was a real problem with the government only giving subsidies to above 100 kilowatt, and therefore only the rich were getting the subsidies, not anyone who could use less than 10 or needs only 5 or 7 or 20. So now we are really working with organizations in trying to ensure that this goes through a parliamentary, the parliament, so that the government can subsidize. And this is where we need international voices to come in. We need people to help us, organizations to help us to ensure that these are reached. Then you have the mangroves. We are the largest private sector mangrove afforestation in Bangladesh. We do that. And, it's impossible to just go and think that you're going to go and set up mangroves, a mangrove forest. Every inch of land, somebody is living on that. Somebody's livelihood comes from there. So how are you going? It's not like the Amazon where you can just throw the seeds and it grows. Every single mangrove plant is protection, which is the first green belt of protection of cyclones, which are like coming more and more every year. Then it's the green, so this is the first green belt of protection. Then comes the embankment, which you have to maintain. Then comes livelihood of the people because they're using this land. So protection, livelihood, and then there is, of course, the carbon, compensation that you get out of that, the mitigation. And you have a full biodiversity which works with this. And be it for agriculture, be it for the fishermen, you know, and then you link it to an awareness program of the people so they know every time they migrate, what are the government services that are available to them? Can they avail these services? Do they have the knowledge to demand? So when you are dealing with, you know, you are dealing with mitigation, it's at a certain level. Then you deal with adaptation, which is at a certain level. And resilience is part of life, be it for the trees, be it for the animals, be it for human beings. And I would say today, it's accountability. The government needs accountability. The companies, which are, I understand, they have to do it. They need. We all need heat in winter and the ACs in summers and the cars to move and everything to happen. Okay, but we need accountability of what the carbon footprints are. So besides NGOs, because we also need their accountability, you know, and. So, you know, this is the reason we are just landed with ensuring every action we take has to deal with nature and rights.
Thank you so much, Rana. It's so inspiring, and I think what you say resonates a lot with what we heard from Dr. Usman just before in terms of considering all the different aspects together, mitigation, adaptation, resilience. There is no sort of Chinese wall in between all these different actions, but it's very, very interconnected. I'm sure there's going to be a lot also to come back in the conversation later on. Thank you. And last but not least on the panel, Aurélien. So thank you for making it all the way through the gate. We know it can be a challenging experience. So Aurélien is the Aurélien Donnet is the Vice CEO for Finance, Innovation and Investment at ACTED, an international NGO which supports over 18 million people in 43 countries in the world. And for the past 15 years, it's been working on the implementation of resilient economic models for humanitarian aid and development to maximize the impact on the most vulnerable countries and individuals. So Aurélien, we're very excited actually to have you tell us more about how you see from your and from the ACTED perspective the role of humanitarian actors in climate transformation, and then as well walking us through the very unique vision that ACTED has developed in terms of linking carbon with exclusion and poverty. So floor is yours. Thank you. Oh.
Yes.
Sorry.
So hello everyone. I'm very happy to be here, surrounded by such a powerful and inspiring discussion around climate, carbon, and acceptance at the community level, which I think is indeed a very key element. So climate transformation is a big word, so I would like maybe to go back on one thing that generates climate change is we talked about it before with Lai intervention, is basically the greenhouse gas emission that the aid sector can create while wanting to support the needs of population in the world. So I see 3 levels where humanitarian actors can have a role to play with relating to this greenhouse gas emission. The first aspect I think that is important is that and I'm more talking here about the international community of actors, we need to walk the talk, meaning we need to acknowledge the fact that while wanting to respond to the needs, we are also contributing to have negative impact by ourselves being emitters of carbon. Once we make this statement, we can then look at the specific areas where we can mitigate this emission and reduce them to finally be in a position, and I think that's maybe the most important part, to be able to influence internally inside our organization, influence the several stakeholders we work with, including the donors community, including the regulators, etc., etc. When we launched the carbon footprint of ACTED 7 years ago, scope 1, 2, and 3 in line with the IPCC recommendation, etc. Some person inside the organization were saying, you know, we are such a small contributor of carbon. Why do we want to create another complex mechanism to do another report, and that might divert us from the humanitarian imperative that we need to figure out on a daily basis. And we went through an internal consultation process, and as you say, it was a bit like a giving birth process. You know, I agree. I really like this image, because we say we cannot be top down on such an approach. We need to consult the people who are in the field. We need to consult the communities first that we work with to make sure that what we will put in place won't, at the end of the day, disrupt the way we work. So by going through this discussion, we realize one thing. We say, okay, let's first evaluate our carbon footprint and then figure out what we will do with it. So we have not done everything at once. We started in 2017 to get some experts to work with us to do the first carbon footprint of ACTED methodology. It was such a long process. It took us 2 years to get it out, etc., realizing we had to simplify the models internally. And we have been piloting this for a couple of years before arriving with a tool that is now digitalized internally and is now not too complex to deploy for the field team, because this was an extremely difficult element. And once we see our carbon footprint, I don't remember, it was 80,000 tons of carbon per year at this period of time, we say, okay, how can we make sure that we now move forward to reduce it? In 22, our carbon footprint is 62,000 tons of carbon, which could look small if you look at the fact that ACTED is supporting 18 million people in the world by generating this amount of carbon, or which is very high if you compare it, if you look at what would be needed to basically sequestrate this amount of carbon. We looked at it, we will need to plant 1 million trees for 10 years before we are able to sequestrate, it's a very difficult for me to word for me to say, this amount of carbon. So it's massive. Just for 1 year of activity for 18 million people, you have 10 years of planting 1 million trees. And this is where people started to realize internally, okay, actually there is a link between what we do, the global warming, and the climate change that we are seeing in the different countries we intervene in. So we developed an internal greening strategy. Once we stated this with the people around the table, and we say, okay, the first pillar of this strategy will be mobilize, because we need all the third party and inside the organization to make sure that people are fully conscious and are fully taking the lead in the process. Mobilize not only our staff, but also our partners, our suppliers, I will come back to it, our donors as well. And believe me, this part is the most difficult part, to maintain the motivation to doing carbon footprint, talking about climate, as you said, is a bit boring. We have a lot of other priorities to deal with every day at the field level. So to maintain this is difficult, and we had to develop some internal training tools, some contests between countries, etc., to make it a bit, fun to do. The second aspect of this strategy is the measurement. I won't come back to it, but what we saw between 22 and 2017, is that we started to see few first reduction effects. So it took us 6 to 7 years to first see the 10% of reduction of carbon efforts. We calculate the efforts according to the number of staff. So we take the carbon footprint of ACTED at global level, and we divide by number of employees and full-time equivalent employees, and we check what it means. Now we're analyzing. Is it structural? Is it because we did a lot of good things? Or is this just because of our programmings are based on, context analysis, and they should not be driven just by carbon emission? Of course not. And it happened that in many countries we used a lot more than previous years some kind of activities that are less impactful. So I'm not saying here that, okay, we are going in the right direction and being too optimistic, because it can go up, I'm pretty sure, in the coming period. So it's not a set science, and we need to, I agree with what you were saying, to all mobilize to go in the right direction. The third pillar of this strategy was, of course, the reduction effort. So here, to drive and capture the internal emission reduction, we deployed, we started to create some some teams who started to work on reduction action plans at field level and composed by anybody in the organization, a program manager, a logistics person, someone in HQ, a driver, anybody is part of these squads. We call them green squads, teams, to look at what can we do, concretely speaking, to move in the right direction. And so, for example, they came up with, so we did one thing. We did some top to bottom approach to say, we need to find solutions for this and that, and it's mandatory. So coming back to the issue of mobilizing people, at some point we wanted to do a very bottom-up approach, but we realized that you need also a little bit of a top-down approach on some very important issues. But 70% of the rest is bottom-up, meaning it's proposition from people to contribute to positive solutions. So we went through projects to provide alternatives to plastics, improving waste management practices, installing solar panels on the different offices. Actually, I was last week with our country director of Pakistan, and interestingly, they put some solar panel on all the offices in the capital office in Pakistan. It was amortized in 1.5 years, the cost of investment. And we are now having an 80% electricity bill cut. So there is also a financial interesting implication of going green or using some renewable energy that is not valorized enough, I guess, in the sector and towards the donors. Because we have this habit of working with funding for 1 year or 1.5 years. So for a donor to get the benefit of actually this reduction of cost, you will need to have a view over 3 to 4 years period. So there is also the need of a mental shift from the system and the way even the funding stream is working to understand this and to be able to have the impact indicators applied. Finally, we realized during this carbon footprint that the biggest part of our carbon emission was coming from the scope 3, so meaning the indirect emission through the supply chain of the organization. So we realized that if we want to be really impactful in terms of carbon, it's nice to put solar panels, everything on our office, but it represents less than 3% of our carbon impact. We need to have a discussion with the suppliers. We need to integrate some elements in the procurement rules that valorize the how taken into consideration is the greening aspects. And this can be difficult as well. And this might need also the support of regulators and donors, because you need to show that you selected your suppliers in the most transparent manner as possible. So we need some kind of standard criteria to then say, no, you're not being selected because you're too harmful to the environment. Who are we as NGO to say that to a supplier, et cetera, et cetera. So it brings a lot of elements of question on the table.
Aurélien, can I ask you, we're
Sure.
going to be running a little bit out of time. Can I ask you maybe in 1 minute to conclude, if you want also to introduce the 3.0 vision? It's extremely dense and extremely rich, actually. So I hope we'll have time to get back to you.
Yeah, I mean, the 3.0 approach is simple. Is to say, okay, zero exclusion, zero carbon, zero poverty. How can we contribute to resolve this opposition that we have between the big agendas? On one side, fighting the extreme poverty, 1 billion people living below the poverty line, and on the other side, not being harmful to the environment and to the planet. So it's this big, confrontation of big agendas with, but starting from the ground, starting from all the partners we work with. This is why we are creating an alliance, 3.0 alliance, with partners having concrete action on the ground to contribute to this both agenda and to be able to mobilize largely beyond the humanitarian sector. So just to give you one small example to conclude, we went to see, for example, the impact investment world, so the financial sector. We think that the financial sector has a big role to play, even in humanitarian operation, even in development, even in greening, to raise some bonds. So we issued some bonds as a INGO to help to support us to do this greening transition for ACTED, but also for actors that we work with. And we also advocated a lot on one last thing that, before I forget, which is related to killing a bit the divide between emergency, development, etc., because we realized that if we want to put the Earth suffering at the same level than the human suffering, which is all what we are saying here, we have created an internal concept we call humanitarian, human and Earth. And if we want to make it happen, we need, when we respond to an emergency, respond to the need of the people who are suffering now, but think about the future generation of people who will arrive after. And it's a complete change of mentality, even when you think about your response, because you might need to do some action, I don't know, planting trees or building some systems to retain water when you have issues of floods coming in the future, which could look at not being humanitarian emergency actions. So we need also to be able to explain to the donor community, to all agree that emergency is not just distributing kits and doing a response on what just happened now, but integrating some activities and costs, which will need money and will need also reason why we are attracting also the financial sector to support this, because we need additional source of funding and of capacity and of technical capacity to integrate this into the humanitarian responses.
Thank you so much. It's a very comprehensive, actually, perspective at what needs to be done. I really, it was very helpful that you mentioned how much, when ACTED developed its experience, had to go through, finding ways to get quicker, digitalized tools, found generic approaches, and at the same time, looking at very technical issues like what do we do with offsetting, what do we do with supply, which are very complex nut to cracks, actually, when we get to implementation. And thank you as well for mentioning the donor aspect, which is not actually tackled as such in this panel, but is definitely an extremely important component of enabling the sector getting towards this transition. So thank you very much for all these important points. So we're getting to the end of these first rounds of presentation. There are a few people who have actually already asked to take the floor during the Q&A. We also have the chance to have Shaheen Ashraf, who instead of speaking at the beginning, will help us maybe have a few additional remarks right now after the panel has finished their presentation. So Shaheen, if you're online, we would love to have your perspective on this question on the climate transformation of the sector. So Shaheen Ashraf is the chairwoman of the Board of Trustees of IGVA and the global advocacy lead at Islamic Relief. Shaheen, if you can hear me, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Beatrice. I hope you can all hear me. Oh, I can see myself, so that's fine. So good afternoon, everyone. Apologies I can't be in the room with you today, but I just wanted to thank the penultimate speaker who spoke on Bangladesh. Addressing the challenges faced by IDPs in South Asia, it requires a very comprehensive approach that considers the interplay between climate change, geography, and human displacement. And what's interesting is the international cooperation and policy frameworks that are crucial in addressing these complex issues and protecting the rights and well-being of internally displaced people in the region and the accountability mechanisms that are in place. And Beatrice, you just spoke about accountability in climate change. It's a multifaceted concept that encompasses lots of things. You've got the historical responsibility, you've got the emissions reductions, you've got the adaptation efforts, you've got the legal mechanisms, as well as the international agreements. But then you've got the financial accountability. And for us, promoting the accountability becomes a very positive way of addressing climate change effectively. So what I was going to say right at the beginning is, we gather here today with a sense of urgency, actually. The clock is ticking and we have absolutely no time to lose on these issues. And as we discuss the deep transformation of the humanitarian system and what lies ahead, We've all heard the IPCC report that made it very clear that global warming is, we have seen the crucialness around the global warming. And we're also talking about the greenhouse gases. We want emissions to peak at 2025, and we want them to be reduced by 2030. I mean, the alarming thing is, that's merely short of 7 years from now. At the recent Bonn conference, representatives from both the developing nations met to lay the groundwork for the decisions that will shape the upcoming COP28 in Dubai. Unfortunately, the negotiations on mitigation work and finance, they were mired by processes rather than concrete action commitments, and the lack of progress only exacerbates the loss and damage suffered by those who have contributed the least to climate change. The decline of fossil fuels is inevitable, we know that, but it's high time we prioritize investments in renewable energies, particularly in conflict-affected and fragile countries. And this transition would not only address the environmental crisis, but also promote social justice. At ECFA and as humanitarian organizations, we bear a moral responsibility to reduce our own greenhouse emissions and minimize our greenhouse and minimize the environmental footprint. And many of the speakers have spoken about that today. We must align ourselves with the Paris Agreement, striving for a 50% reduction by 2030. And we already witnessed to the disastrous impacts of climate change, as many of the speakers before me have said. Even the conflict and fragile settings, I mean, I've seen from the Afghanistan perspective, the communities are burdened by increasing food prices, debt crisis, vulnerability to fossil energy prices. It's crucial that we seek social justice and compensation for what I class as the social loss and damage, which we often don't talk about. And to truly act in accordance with the humanitarian principles and ensure the survival of humanity beyond the next 50 years, which is why I talk about the critical element of it. And the last thing I want to say before I conclude is we must move beyond our own individual bubbles. We must deeply overhaul our systems and our processes and our frameworks to meet the impending challenges. But simply reducing greenhouse gas emissions in our supply chains and our operational footprints is not enough. We must also address the shortcomings of our food systems and our agricultural practices, especially in areas where vulnerable populations are already grappling with droughts, heat waves, and deforestation, which is caused by unsustainable farming practices. So in conclusion, I want to say is that the deep transformation of the humanitarian system is imperative in the face of complex and evolving changes. And the recent focus on the UN Security Council on the impacts of climate change on conflict and insecurity is a stark reminder of the interconnectedness between climate and global stability. By implementing effective policies and coordination tools, integrating the climate charter, and leveraging the efforts of the roadmap, we can forge a more resilient and responsive humanitarian system. So thank you to all the speakers. We've come at a time that we come together to collaborate and embrace this transformation. And finally, just to ensure that no one is left behind in our pursuit of a safer and more sustainable future. Thank you, Beatrice. Back over to you.
Thank you so much, Shaheen, and thanks for reminding us of the emergency of this, of what needs to be done, in spite of the fact that transformation does take time as well. So it's quite a challenging and daunting task for the sector. And thanks also for reminding us of the fact that it's an investment for the sector, an investment that we all need to make. So we have a little bit of time. I think we started a little bit later, so apologies for running late. But we have a few, I think, interventions that from the floor. I would like first to turn to colleagues from FAO. Dervla, would you like to take the floor?
It's working? Okay, thanks. Thank you so much. It was a fascinating discussion. I think what it really showed more than anything is the importance of putting local actors and local efforts at the center of everything we do. This is a theme I believe that's running through everything, whether it's climate or humanitarian action. It's the same. We have a bit of a reputation as humanitarians, as the people who will jump on a plane or ship goods miles. And we really have to pull back on that, maybe be a bit less egotistical. It's not about us saving the world. It's about us supporting efforts to save the world, right? For FAO, obviously, climate is a major issue. We work in rural areas. We work with rural communities, whether it's in humanitarian or development. And it's very clear to us that we need to do much more than we're doing. Like many organizations, we have environmental and social frameworks because we believe you can't separate the well-being of people from the well-being of the environment. But we want to do more, and we're doing our best to do more as we roll out those frameworks, especially in looking at how we purchase goods, how we transport goods, what we're doing with them. So we are trying to improve. I think, like everyone, we have benchmarks, and we hope that we will see progress. But it isn't an easy way to go. We also believe that there needs to be much more of a focus on proactive disaster and climate risk management within the humanitarian sector. This isn't something for other people to do. I think you mentioned that we can have long-term impacts even in short-term emergency action, and this is really, really key. It's also key in a context of reduced funding. How can we be more impactful in the long term when there's going to be less money? We have, obviously, as FAO, we have a lot of work on disaster risk reduction within our livelihoods recovery programming and our humanitarian work, like setting up nurseries, promoting reforestation to mitigate the impacts of floods and landslides, training smallholder farmers on water management, conservation, etc. The third thing we believe is critical is that all our actions should be nature or biodiversity sensitive. That means that they're more regenerative than they are extractive. So we're working with some other agencies, UNHCR and others, on a program to green the humanitarian system, focusing on displacement settings, which can be hugely environmentally destructive. And out of that pilot work that we're doing in a number of countries, we're hoping to extract some guidance that can be useful to the entire humanitarian community about how we can be more proactively better and not worse. And finally, reducing and avoiding pollution. This is critical. Obviously, FAO deals also with pests, plant pests, animal diseases, and these can be, the way we deal with them can be as destructive as the disease or itself. So part of this has been, for example, in fighting locusts, trying to promote the use of biological pesticides and manual efforts to address them. So this was just to say, I think there's so much more we can do if we look inside and just think what's more efficient internally. But thank you so much for this. I'd love to know more about what has been working for other agencies. I think it's a really great way to find out how we can all be better. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. We can't agree more that sharing best practices and good experience is really part of the acceleration. Then I'd like to call, I think we have a colleague from the EU delegation, Susanna, who may be in the room or online. Yes. Thank you, Susanna. The floor is yours.
Yes, hello, good afternoon. Please apologies for music a little bit earlier. I really didn't intend to. So I first really want to congratulate you on a very, very important and very informative meeting. We, on our side, we have organized before a meeting, and it really is complementary. Our side event was on climate and displacement, so I mean, having both together, it adds to a very great extent. It's very useful, and I believe, you know, our Jacob Bergsman, the chief negotiator for COP, EU chief negotiator for COP, when we were thinking of side events for ECOSOC, and then he said, you know what is a question that I would really like to ask the humanitarian organizations? How do they prepare for a temperature over 1.5 degrees? Because this is inevitably coming. So thank you. And if you are willing, because I think you are answering already, even through all your presentations, but if you want to add something, it would be a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. We indeed had the chance to hear a lot of insightful experiences on how they are anticipating the deep transformation that's needed. Thank you very much. I think we also have in the room a colleague from the US delegation. So please, Madam, take the floor. If you don't mind introducing yourself, thank you.
One's off as well. Oh, here we go. Hello, my name is Tammy Hasfeld CP. I'm representing USAID. The United States is committed to doing its part to contribute to a greener humanitarian sector and world. USAID's new climate strategy, released last year, commits the agency to equitable and ambitious climate action that defines not only what we do, but how we do it in terms of both our programming and internal operations. USAID's Bureau for Humanitarian Assistance, or BHA, is also contributing to digital transformation in climate and humanitarian action. BHA is a co-funder of the Nexus Environmental Assessment Tool, or NEAT+, which is a rapid climate and environmental screening tool for humanitarians. NEAT+ is recommended for advancing the commitments of the Climate and Environment Charter for humanitarian organizations and is widely promoted by humanitarian donors to raise awareness on climate and environmental sensitivities and risks. BHA is also prioritizing the greening of our humanitarian supply chain. A few examples of our work in this space include the following. Since 2019, we have joined forces with more than 20 multinational organizations through the Joint Initiative for Sustainable Humanitarian Assistance Packaging Waste Management to leverage action, including private sector engagement and last-mile community-led solutions for plastics waste management from supply chains. Second, BHA helps fund the Innovative Fleet Forum, which is the world's only not-for-profit organization dedicated to cleaner, safer, and more effective humanitarian transport in developing nations. The Fleet Forum is currently developing BHA's funded Green Me tool to help reduce the environmental impacts of humanitarian fleets. Third, BHA supports the logistics cluster's REC project, or Waste Management, Reverse Logistics, Environmentally Sustainable Procurement, and Circular Economy project, which seeks to reduce adverse environmental consequences of humanitarian logistics through awareness, practical guidance, and real-time environmental expertise. Finally, the climate workforce is characterized by low levels of diversity amongst staff and leadership. Addressing this is a critical step towards more effective and locally led organization and action. USAID's climate strategy, in addition to its main objectives, has a special objective that commits us to doing our part by strengthening the diversity, equity, inclusiveness, and accessibility of our climate staff, and to support implementing partners to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and I think it's great actually to have a few donors and governments in the room, because I think it was emphasized by our speakers today that it's really important to have the donors on board in terms of supporting this transformation, and that more needs to be done. So thanks for sharing those initiatives with us. So we're nearly getting to the end of this conversation. We have one question in the room and one question online, and then we're going to have closing remarks by Sheila Henry, and we will be closing the event. So maybe you're going to take the two questions, get back to the panel, and then go to Sheila. Nishani first, and then online. Oh, sorry.
All right, thanks. Hi, I'm Nishani Jaimaha. I'm the Learning and Climate Change Program Coordinator at ICWA. Happy to be here, and also great to see ICWA member at the table sharing lessons learned and experience. Just to also represent, I'm also representing the Climate and Environment Charter for Humanitarian Organizations team with the ICRC, IFRC, and ICWA. We're also working towards setting up the Climate and Environment Charter Secretariat to support in the future to actually promote and support organizations, especially local national organizations, to be able to actually take the commitments and implement them and put it into practice. So with the projects that you are doing and the lessons learned and the sharing that is important and key to take forward to also share wider with the signatories and the wider humanitarian community is essential. And it's great to see this project moving forward and really taking flight and looking forward to the next steps of it as well. I think also we as a humanitarian sector, we have another role that we need to look at through IHL, and that's also what's the environment impact that conflicts have in our societies. That's something that I think we don't talk much and talk enough, and I think we see this in Ukraine, obviously, with the environment impact on the agriculture of wars as well. I'm not sure how much of that is being looked at, and that's something maybe to think about in the future, how we as humanitarians can I don't know if there's what sort of role we have in that. One of the questions I had actually is on offsetting, and it's becoming more so a normalized practice, of course. Ensuring social benefits, of course, to this communities that we're offsetting is something that I think needs a huge discussion. And there's a momentum to raise awareness on this agenda. So while offsetting should not be the long-term solution, obviously it should be, the goal is to reduce emissions. My question, I think, to the panel would be, would the humanitarian sector, and especially me coming from an NGO network, for us as NGOs, what's the role that we have to play in this? Is there a discussion to be had in terms of how are we evolving our programming, policy or advocacy in terms of, is it relevant in some way to those offsetting projects? How can we, take that into consideration in our program advocacy and our policy work? And then can the humanitarian sector play a role in ensuring that communities experiencing social and economic benefits from these projects are involved and encouraged to be part and parcel of them? And then the last question, sorry, it's a lot of them. Do we see this as an area where the humanitarian sector could bring added value? Because we are working in conflict and fragile contexts where there's not many other presence in there, especially private sector sometimes. So how do we have, how do we contribute and how can we play a role? Over.
Thank you. There were a lot of questions. We probably won't have time to answer them all, but thanks for putting them on the table and bringing them to the conversation. Zani, would you want to tell us about the question online?
I actually also have a few more coming in, but maybe I'll say them quickly, and if anyone answer even later on, it's possible. Margot from Milan says, thank you for the inspiring talk. In your view, what is the most common practice and easiest action implemented by humanitarian organizations? So maybe what is a few that are most common and easiest actions? And then I have a question about food insecurities in war-torn countries. So what are the advice concerning the most sustainable production of food and preservation? And one last question asking how scientific offsetting is. So if those are some questions to meditate on.
Thank you. Lots of questions. I'll just let the panel react. I think there were two questions on offsetting, so it's probably one that we should tackle. Who would like to go first? Yes, Runa, please go ahead.
Yeah, got it. Thank you very much for bringing this up. Actually, Bruno and us, we were just sitting and I was discussing this, that carbon credit, we have a big responsibilities. Those at the field actually doing what is carbon offsetting for the larger organization. And I've actually stopped the process till I am myself convinced that it is ethically sound for the community in the long run. Because carbon credits, first of all, I don't want to be their conscience, you know? So we start from there. Second, but we have to do it because we should plant trees. And mangroves gives the largest carbon, sequestration back. So, okay, so has to be done. Protection of the people there has to be done. However, there, as I said, I don't want to be their conscience. And the way the carbon credit works today, there are so many gaps because this conscience gap is there. I don't want to be that. And second, how will it be tackled in the long run? Because today you are doing it at a certain cost. Within 5 years, the cost, does not come back to the community, will not come back to the community, but only the rich companies will keep taking who have bought it before, earlier. So that is a big difficulty, to negotiate. So I think these are things which need to be deeply addressed. And just because there's money available as an NGO, or we call ourselves a social purpose organization, we have to kind of put our foot down in certain, this is our way of saying we need you to be accountable also. And it's, I think this is a very important question, and we have to really, really look into this very deeply. We don't have a solution as yet, but we have to have a solution to this before this snowballs and, bursts.
Can I come? Yeah, just yes, and then I'm running on this question of carbon credits and all this. I think so. Of course, obviously, we all know that we need first to avoid, then to reduce, and finally, if you have something remaining, because for an actor like ACTED, the ultimate goal would be to become carbon neutral. We know that carbon neutrality is a concept already under discussion, and it's not because you contribute to a project in Nepal to support biogas, what we do, that you can claim that you compensate what you have done as a emission. So first, there is a debate on the overall framework. Still, as you said, there is financial capacity here. There is the need to plant trees, to plant mangroves, to do a lot of action. And one of the best drivers to do things, unfortunately, in the world right now is political force and financial resources. So we have a role and even a responsibility as NGO and as a humanitarian actor to tackle this issue, not to say it's bad, let's put it outside, because it will be too bad knowing the difficulty we have to already cover the current needs, financially speaking, but to indeed completely make sure that the social aspect is integrated into it. And there are mechanisms existing. You can have a contract with the local communities for the 10 to 15 years of the carbon credit issuance to set rules, to say even if the price change over time, meaning the investor gets more money because what he purchased as a carbon credit rights generate more values, you can negotiate also with the investor to say it has to be given back to the community, it has to be given back also to the operator who is following up the project, etc., etc. So all this will need to be discussed in the coming years, but I see this more as an opportunity than as a threat. But now we need to be very careful in the way we deal with it.
Sorry. Yeah, just so thanks for the two contributions. The Climate Action Accelerator, we've basically taken a position that we really need a principled approach on this, and it's becoming quite urgent to actually come to credible standards and harmonized practices when it comes to compensation, not just for the humanitarian or the aid sector, it's for the whole of society. And it's highly likely that some of the practices of today will be maybe forbidden in 2, 3, 5 years from now. So there are two main questions about carbon compensation. One is about just the calculation, so the maths. So what does it mean to have a claim of carbon neutrality? And does it work at an organizational level? Can you just emit on one side and buy credits on the other side and claim to be neutral. So the growing consensus of experts and scientists in this account is to say, well, no, it doesn't work. The maths don't work, and the only notion of carbon neutrality that is real is actually a planetary level. It doesn't mean at an organizational level. It doesn't mean almost anything. And numbers do count. I mean, today, what we have in front of us is a need to reduce in absolute terms emissions by 8 or 9 by 2050. And what can be sequestrated at the maximum level can only take up, 10 or 15% of the emissions. So anybody who believes you can just, buy yourself out of this situation is fundamentally wrong. So that's very clear. Then the other aspect of compensation is it can represent a genuine and positive funding stream for some projects, for some environmentally friendly projects. So the question is how to make a difference between those that are actually effective for communities, for the environment, etc., and those that actually can have even dangerous counter effects. We know about monoculture of trees that sometimes are done by deforesting primary forests, etc., and its negative impact. So you have to make a big difference between interesting funding streams to actually support good projects and the calculations, and I think it's time for some key organizations, and I would include the United Nations in this, to really also set the standards that are needed on this account, and notably by not counting carbon offsets in their emissions account.
Thank you. Lailing, do you want to say last word on offsetting or something? I mean, there were so many important themes that were touched.
Maybe I'll just touch on the very relevant question regarding the role of us as humanitarian organizations. And I think that particularly in fragile and vulnerable contexts, in contexts of conflict, where people are, being displaced, it does behoove us to really see that that's a place where we can definitely raise the voice, raise the visibility of the communities, and for us, the patients that we see, and really describe, the complexity of some of these situations, but also to highlight that you said that, oh, private sector is not there. Well, in fact, there are many conflicts countries where private sector is in fact there as well, along us as well. So I won't get into that whole rabbit hole, but only to say that, yes, I think there are lots of things that we can say, a big role that we can play. And currently the whole discussion on loss and damage is one area where perhaps we can contribute as well. So.
Thank you so much. And so with this, I'm closing the Q&A session of the panel. We are extremely late, but thank you to all of you who are still online and in the room. I'm handing over to Sheila Henry for a 2-minute closing remark. Sheila, if you're online, the floor is yours. You're Senior Humanitarian Affairs Officer based at the UN in New York.
Yes. Can you hear me okay? Okay. I'm Sheila Henry. I'm the chief of the Sustainability, Resilience, and Risk Management section at OCHA. So colleagues, as we draw this inspiring session to a close, I'm profoundly encouraged by our shared dedication and momentum towards accelerating climate transformation in the humanitarian sector, especially as someone who myself is responsible for facilitating and encouraging a 45% reduction in OCHA and the coordination structure's carbon footprint by 2030. I'd like to begin just by expressing my gratitude as well to Climate Action Accelerator and EHAN, as well as the co-sponsors. But everybody here's commitment to shaping a more sustainable, resilient humanitarian sector is truly inspiring. Each of our panelists has enriched our understanding of what is needed to propel this transformation, including Ms. Lili Lee from MSF, who highlighted the potential for individual organizations to be catalysts for change, sharing valuable lessons from MSF's pioneering role in adopting a climate environmental roadmap. Mr. Osman's demonstrated the value of local comprehensive grassroots approach to climate action in a very difficult working environment in the Sahel region. Ms. Runa Khan from Friendship gave us a window into innovative local climate action happening in Bangladesh, thus underscoring a really potential for localized and government-supported solutions and addressing climate issues and global issues of change, accountability, especially where others considered it way too difficult. Mr. Aurelien of ACTED further elaborated on the importance of holistic measures, which ACTED has implemented through their transformative 3.0 vision with their 3 areas of action. I think we're all in agreement that the giving birth metaphor is personally inspiring. And for me, the description of how difficult that birth can be in light of competing priorities and the eventual impact of the efforts, both bottom up and top down, was wonderful. Ms. Shaheen Ashraf shared with us her insights on the complexity of accountability for climate change and profound transformation ahead for all of the humanitarian system and social justice. So the Q&A session brought further insight from the perspectives of FAO and the EU delegation, USAID, and others, outlining some innovative tools and projects, reinforcing our collective responsibility and the significant potential for increased and proactive coordination, preparation, local-led solutions across the humanitarian sector. The questions also posed about conflict, food insecurity, and climate, as well as our role in the debate around offsetting, which I think we can agree may need another session. From OCHA's perspective, coordination remains key in the transformation period. To that end, we must not only capitalize on the strategic guidance provided by the IASC climate roadmap, but also the interagency coordination initiatives to ensure unified action towards reducing our carbon footprint. OCHA has pledged to integrate a response to this crisis across all our functions. We are committed to enhancing our role and unique added value in adapting the humanitarian system to present and future climate threats while placing the interests of the most vulnerable at the center of our climate action. We have our own climate roadmap, which revolves around the key pillars of finance, advocacy, coordination, operational support. I won't get into the details around those, but of course it involves our pooled funds and locally led assistance and resilience building efforts in the greater focus on climate environment. We've got advocacy, where we're facilitating agreement in the humanitarian agreement on bold positions, mobilizing collective action, and amplifying the voices of the communities most impacted by climate change. NEAT Plus has been mentioned already, as well as some of our other tools. We have the Climate Environment Charter for humanitarian organizations, and we assume that most of you in the room have signed up to that, as has OCHA as well. We are following our UN System Secretariat Strategy for Sustainability Management, as well as the Social Sustainability Management, which goes back to what a lot of you were saying around the marriage between environment and social sustainability. As part of the UN Secretariat's Climate Action Plan, we've set ambitious targets for reducing carbon emissions through reducing electricity consumption and commercial air travel, increasing the use of renewable energy, meeting sustainability standards for events, etc. As mentioned by Ms. Lee, this is not a precise science, and I have painted a somewhat rosy picture of everybody's ambition. However, these commitments and targets reflect our unwavering dedication to addressing the climate crisis and our ambition to lead by example and create a positive impact on the communities we serve, along with the rest of you. In the face of the planetary emergency in the humanitarian sector at the forefront, we've acknowledged today our dual role that we play, not just in witnessing the impact of climate change on vulnerable populations, but also in being part of the solution. Our discussion today has reinforced our conviction in our shared vision for resilience, low carbon humanitarian sector, and have left me feeling a little more optimistic than when I sat down this morning. While the challenges are vast, so too is our shared wisdom, commitment, and capacity for change. So thank you all for your participation and your dedication to the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sheila. It was an amazing wrap-up. Thank you very much. And I think with this, we're closing this session. I think we have indeed the topic for the next session, probably offsetting. Thank you very much to all, and thank you to our panelists.